Yeah, okay.
Cool.
Can you hear us right now? If you can hear, just tap in the chat room. I can. Okay. Yeah, okay. Got it. Okay. Sorry.
Great. Okay, I'll stay a little bit by my computer, so hopefully everyone online can hear. But also, as a loud American, hopefully that also helps. I rarely need a microphone, to be honest. So zooming forward. So we have Nature. And Nature is, as one of the more famous journals, it's also quite selective. And because of that, it's really looking for the most significant advances and the ones that really have wide implications. Something we always say that I know doesn't always hold true. I don't understand everything Nature publishes, but the idea is the articles are written and presented in a way and presenting interesting results that anyone with some sort of scientific or engineering background can understand them. Again, as we get more specialized and as Nature publishes particle physics, that understanding may or may not actually be there, but that's the idea. And because of this, Nature tends to get the most readers and also tends to get more media coverage. And there's a big media team who works with the editors and with authors to try to help disseminate results. There are a couple of things I wanted to highlight that Nature's trying to emphasize over the past couple of years. The first one is that we know historically the Nature journals haven't published a lot of engineering work, and that's an oversight on our part, and we really want to publish engineering work. So there was an editorial a few months ago essentially explaining this. Nature really wants to publish more engineering work. We want you to submit engineering work, and we want to find a good home for it. So I know there's a conception that Nature will only publish scientific or fundamental work, but we're changing that, and we really want to engage with the engineering communities. The other thing I wanted to mention for anyone who's working on sustainability, which I think in today's scientific area, probably all of us are to some extent. We know it's about the midpoint, a little bit over in terms of the SDGs and when they're supposed to end. So we've been doing a portfolio-wide stock take of what the progress in the SDGs are and where we are with that right now. So this is an open collection. It's something where you can still submit things to it, which is kind of rare for nature. But if you have work with a really strong sustainability focus, especially related to the SDGs, this is a good area to kind of look out for and is really highlighting nature's excitement about sustainability work. The next set of journals I want to highlight are the nature research journals. Like I said, these are going to be nature and then either a thematic area or a discipline. So nature chemical engineering, nature water, nature cities, nature engineering, things like that. These journals are still very selective, and the idea is that the work that they'll be publishing is interesting to everyone within a discipline. So for instance, anyone working on water research should be interested and at least roughly be able to read and understand anything published in Nature Water. Same with sustainability and other things within the topic. Again, these are still fairly selective, but one of the next journals is going to be a little more inclusive. But one of the things I wanted to highlight is that we've been trying to expand the amount of sustainability work that we can publish within the nature research journals. I would say this really goes back about 15 years ago to the launch of Nature Geoscience. But then through the years, we've tried to move more into applied and interesting thematic areas. So focusing on pressing issues like climate change, looking at energy research and sustainability work. And then this year we have Nature Cities and Nature Chemical Engineering as new journals. There's also a lot of interest within our other journals that maybe aren't devoted to a specific thing that's obviously sustainability, but they still play a big role in it. So Nature Materials and Chemistry and Catalysis and Synthesis would also publish work that's related to various parts of engineering and sustainability. Nature Communications, honestly, I'm a bit biased, but it's one of my favorite journals. I worked there for a bit, and this is where the editors basically get to nerd out. We get really excited because we get to send out more articles to review. So if you have an article that maybe isn't quite as splashy as something that you would see in, say, Nature Sustainability, but is still a significant advance and that other specialists are going to be interested in, Nature Communications is a great home for it. Things that Nature Communications really likes are things like mechanistic insight or really exceptional data sets, or if you have a couple of areas where there's been some debate within the field, like is it this mechanism or this mechanism that's causing this effect we're seeing, Nature Communications is a great home. And they have a team dedicated to engineering, which is great. I know that the editorial team, and they're just really lovely people and really excited about engineering. So you'll be in good hands with them. Next are the communications journals. Again, I really like these journals. One of the ones I want to mention is we have a journal called Communications Engineering. The chief editor of that is a really, really passionate editor, and she really loves engineering work. And the communications journals are really launched because we know that there's a lot of really cool research that gets submitted to Nature Communications, but maybe just isn't quite a little bit more of a focused research area. So what happens after you click submit? That's one of the questions I get asked about a lot. So we like to try to demystify it a little bit. The first one, and for the sake of time, I won't spend too much time on this, but is cover letters. People ask me, what's the point in a cover letter? Can't I, does anyone even read it? We do. I like cover letters because this is your chance to talk to us really informally. Tell us, without having to include a bunch of citations or scientific jargon, why your work is interesting. Think about it almost as your elevator pitch to the editor. This is a good place to also explain things and the importance of your work that maybe doesn't quite fit into your paper. And you can do things like explain how this work is different from other parts of the field, or how that your work solves something that's been ongoing in the field but hasn't quite been resolved. And of course, you can also put reviewer suggestions and exclusions. One tip for reviewer exclusions is we do honor them, but please don't put whole countries. The number of times I've seen someone be like, I would like to exclude all of Austria. And you're like, that it kind of makes the editor stop and wonder. So I recommend picking a couple of people to exclude if you think there's someone who won't be unbiased, but suggestions are also great. One thing I really like about reviewer suggestions is it helps me see who you think other experts are in the field and who you think your audience is, because that can tell me something that maybe isn't as clear from reading the introduction or results. If we see quite a difference between who we think would be good reviewers and who you recommend, we're like, oh, okay, maybe there's something in here we can bring out through revisions to help clarify who the audience is, or something like that. Nature Geoscience wrote a really nice editorial on the purpose of cover letters and what they want to see. So if you're interested, I recommend reading that. The main thing is this goes back to kind of your old school sitting there in writing class when you're 15 or something, and your teacher's like, show, don't tell, show, don't tell. Cover letters are the same. Show the reader, in this case, the editor, why you're working on something important, but don't just tell them this is important. Say, oh, there's been a big funding call from some government on this, or there's been a lot of reports published by a big, intergovernmental body or something like that. The next thing are abstracts. I think we all know abstracts are really important, and it's how we decide whether or not we're going to read a paper. The other thing I wanted to mention is abstracts are what potential reviewers see when they're trying to decide whether or not to review your work. So spending a little bit of time on a good abstract is really important. We've noticed anecdotally that the more an abstract is good and really reflects the work, the more quickly you'll get reviewers and the more appropriate they'll be. If we're like, oh, this article is super cool and we really want people to review it, but then you're sending out an abstract that's maybe not had enough time put into it, then it takes a lot longer to secure reviewers. So we recommend spending a bit of time to make it clear what question you're addressing, summarize your important findings, mention any critical methodology briefly, and note the implications of your work. The other thing that's important, I think, and gets overlooked is including key terms or phrases. A lot of us still use or do use Google Scholar or other search engines to find things. So to have your paper picked up in the topics you're interested or to get to the readership, include those keywords so that it's easier for it to be found by people who are just searching for something related to it. This is just a quick overview of how we structure abstracts at Nature. We think it works pretty well for most other journals. Occasionally you'll see one where it has a very specific structure, and of course you should follow that. But if not, again, think about the introduction to the field, give the general problem or the gap. This one's really important. This is how you get readers hooked in, even if they're not in the field. Just say what you show, right, kind of quite upfront. That will really get people interested. And if not, at least they know what you said. Describe the approach, and then right at the end, loop it back to the original problem you're trying to solve and tell the reader how you filled that gap. The less the reader has to guess or try to put a mental puzzle together, the more enthusiastic they'll be about the work. So make it easy for them. So you have your cover letter, you have your abstract, you've clicked submit. What happens then? The editors will look to see if the article or the research you're presenting addresses an important question or solves some sort of technical problem that's been ongoing in the field. They evaluate if it tells us something new or interesting, or is a big advance over previous literature. And then everybody's looking to see if there's strong data for what you are presenting or have observed or are testing. And then the editors really like to know, have you managed to rule out alternative explanations? So when we see discussion sections where they say it could be this or this or this, and then it stops, we get really sad and disappointed. So what we really like are when you're able to say it could be one of these three things, and actually we tested it and it's this one. Some of the reasons for rejection without review is something might just be too specialized for what the editors are looking for. That doesn't mean it's not good or not really interesting. It just means it's more specialized or a little bit of a more incremental advance, which are going to be really important, but maybe will determine which level of the nature hierarchy the editors will be most interested in your work in. Again, if there are unclear conclusions or implications, or if the conclusions have been shown before, even with a different data set or a different set of methodologies. This is especially true for Nature Communications or research journals or Nature. The communications journals are more okay with what we might call confirmatory results, but with a new data set or a new way of looking at it. One thing I always like to emphasize is this really doesn't reflect the quality or value of work. I always like to tell people I got desk rejected by Nature Communications plenty in my research career. It doesn't mean things are bad, and the editors often really like the work. It just doesn't meet whatever they're looking for the specific journal they're working for. Once we send articles out for peer review, the editors want to know, are the results robust and are they technically correct? Reason something might get rejected post-review is there's not enough data or the analysis of the data is somehow flawed and we don't think it's able to be revised. Or there might be, if you aren't able to demonstrate exactly what you're saying and you have to scale back your claims a little bit, then it might turn into something where it's not as much of an advance as was claimed, and then it doesn't meet the editorial bar for that journal. Something that we really like to communicate as editors is it's us, not the reviewers, who make the ultimate decision. So many times we get reviewers who say, I don't even know why this journal sent this out to review. This clearly isn't the level you're looking for. And you're like, well, I work here and it is. So can you please evaluate the science? And so we're often looking at contradictory recommendations. Sometimes you have one reviewer who's mildly positive about a review. Sometimes you have one reviewer who's like, I don't know, it's fine, I guess. And you're like, did you read this? And then sometimes you have one reviewer who is like the little fish monster over there, very thorough and writes a very long report that's very detailed. And as editors, we don't just count, one positive, one and one negative. We try to balance these different reviews and try to come up with what we think is going to be the best solution forward, whether or not it's at our journal or a different journal. Something I also want to highlight is you're able to transfer your article within the journals. So if you submit, say, Nature Chemical Engineering in this case, then it might not be a good fit for them, but we do try to recommend where the article should go. So for instance, an editor might say, usually one of two things if they're recommending a transfer. There might be a guaranteed offer, and those are usually pretty explicit. Like, I have spoken with X editor or X journal, and they guaranteed they would send this article out to review if you transfer it. And those are good because once you transfer it, your article is going out to review. Or there might be what we would call more of a general PS, where it's like, I think this would be a good fit for this journal. Usually it's, you might consider going to Nature Communications or Communications Engineering. And as editors, spend a lot of time chatting with each other about what we're interested in as editors and what would make a good fit for our journal. So we try to make good recommendations. There's also the ability to do this post-review if we think there are addressable concerns, but it maybe wouldn't be of interest to the journals that sent it out to review. And that's something that the individual editor will tell you, and then you would follow the editorial advice to do something like revise the article as they recommend. So quickly, I'll go through Nature Reviews and Nature Reviews Clean Technology. So the Nature Reviews journals, we are journals that publish only reviews and other kind of what we'd call front half pieces. So shorter things like opinions, comments, things like that. And we try for our articles to be interesting to all researchers within a discipline. So for instance, Nature Reviews Materials, their articles should be readable to everyone who's a material scientist. As editors, we spend a lot of time working with our authors on reviews. So we do a lot of developmental editing, suggesting things, saying, okay, we've sent it out to review, the reviewers recommend this or this or this. Here's how we think you can bring all those comments together and address it. And then we do detailed editing. And also, one of my favorite parts is we have art editors who are great artists, which is good because I am very much a clip art type of skill level on art. So our art editors can come in and really make those nice. Nature Reviews Clean Technology, the journal that I'm the chief editor of, is a new journal. We'll be launching January next year or start publishing. And we're focusing really on the technologies and the processes and solutions to get us to a more sustainable future. For just a quick, very non-exhaustive list of things we're interested in, we like topics like clean energy production and transmission and storage, things related to industrial decarbonization and defossilization, carbon capture, sustainable fuels and feedstocks, and more broadly, we're interested in ways to actually get these technologies and processes out to the real world. We know that you can invent something really great in the lab or prototype it, but that doesn't always mean that it'll be bought by people and uptaken or make a real impact. So we're interested in also how we get things from lab scale into the implementation stage. We have a few main article types. The first one is reviews. Everyone, I think, knows what reviews are. What we really try to do is keep these short, around 7,000 words, and have them be really interesting to experts, but also written in a way so that non-experts can pick up and read them. Something I often tell authors is think about the review you would want to give to your graduate student when they first start. Most of what we publish are reviews, but we also publish perspectives, which are similar to reviews, but a little more opinionated, and work to build a strong argument based on an expert opinion or recommend a way forward for a field. Roadmaps are like roadmaps, where these are where we get a series of experts in. They might be part of a consortia or just a really good set of people who have been working in a topic. And they look at the challenges in a certain field or a project or something like that. And then they outline how we should go forward and address these challenges. Expert recommendations are similar, but they're a bit more like a set of here are the problems, but here's actually how we as experts suggest we go forward in quite a short, succinct way. So this is really opinion-based, but based on something like analysis of a lot of the state of the field. Technical reviews, kind of what they sound like. This is state-of-the-art capabilities in a certain area or recommending best practices. And then comments are opinion pieces, and these can be anywhere from calling for scientific action to issues facing the community or how do we address broader issues, say with policy or things like that. One thing I always really like to mention that we'll be publishing are tools of the trade. So these are really short articles, and the reason we started doing these at Nature Reviews Earth and Environment and now do them more broadly across the reviews portfolio is a lot of times in reviews journals, we don't publish a lot from early career researchers, and just in general, the publishing process can be pretty intimidating when you're first starting out. So these are about 1 page just on something that is a common tool or technique or software that folks use in their research, and is written by someone who's usually a PhD student, sometimes kind of a earlier on postdoc. And it's just a nice way to demonstrate what you're working on and to work with an editor to see that we're trying not to be scary. We really like amplifying research, and we hope that this is a good way to help you get more acquainted with the editorial process. Just quite briefly on the Nature Reviews process, often how it works is we'll commission articles. We also take proposals. Some of the best articles I've ever worked with have been proposals, which is great. We provide feedback on different stages. So at the first outline stage and sometimes ahead of peer review, articles undergo peer review. And then something that we do that's quite unique is the editors will do a hands-on edit. So after an article has been through peer review and the reviewers are happy that it's scientifically sound, we as editors will go through and write line by line. Yeah. Is this clear? Can we rephrase this to be a little more concise? How do we convey this to a broad audience? Maybe we should add a reference here. And it's not quite the same as a copy edit, but it's a back and forth with us and the authors to really make sure that the articles are really polished and nicely readable to anyone. And finally, of course, we have the artwork redraw, which is, I always feel a little nerdy, but it always feels kind of like Christmas when our art editor is like, I'm done with the figure set. And you're like, oh my gosh, let's see what it looks like now. So the art edit's really a nice part. And then we work with the authors to get things accepted and get the word out there once they're published, either through social media or working with our media team or something like that. Just a quick example of editing for the sake of confidentiality. We just use a edit that editors at Nature Reviews Physics did to each other, but this is sometimes the level of editing you see. And I like this example because it says Clean Technologies right there. So I got to steal it from them. But like I said, we're really involved. We really try to help make articles shine, and that's why we give feedback along the whole way. Like I said, the art edit is a really nice part. We can take hand-drawn figures as long as the handwriting is legible. Apparently, one of my special skills is reading illegible handwriting, so I've had to get really careful about telling people I'll send these out to peer review because reviewers will come back and be like, I cannot read any of this. But anyways, as long as it's legible, we even work with authors and hand-drawn figures because eventually our art editors will draw it. Like I said, we commission most of our articles, but we really like proposals because they're really interesting and can access parts of the field that we as editors might not have an understanding of. So if there's any interest, please submit articles to us. It can be either a short outline or it can be a full article. Either is fine. And you can also always reach out to us editors if you have any questions. So just wrapping up here, I just want to say, especially for engineers, Nature Portfolio is interested in your work. That's something that we're really hoping to grow in the future. So we're looking to engage. Us editors really do like to try to help find research at home. So even if it's not the first journal you go to, we will try to recommend ones where we think it would be a good fit. And then we as Nature Reviews Clean Technology start publishing next year. So keep a lookout for us and let us know if you have any ideas. And with that, I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for Laura's wonderful and insightful presentations. Now let's proceed to the Q&A sessions. You may ask any questions you may want to ask. So, by the way, today we have 19 online attendees. It's quite a lot,
Yeah.
Okay, so if our attendees, online attendees have any questions, just raise your hand and send a message in the chat room. Then we can check that. Okay. Please.
It's this one. Yes.
Thank you so much. This is really interesting. I'm just wondering, is there any downside to getting rejected? If you get rejected multiple times, does Nature know who you are? Or
I mean, so the downside to getting rejected, it's not from our end, it's really from the point of view, that takes time. So if you're like, I am trying to finish my PhD and my advisor wants everything submitted before I walk across that stage, then having things rejected might slow down the publication process.
Okay.
But we try to be pretty engaged in the fields we handle. So we recognize names, but we're not, no, definitely not.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right, other questions? Yeah.
You didn't talk much about the appeal process.
Yes.
And so what condition, for example, if you have three reviewers, like one positive, one negative, one probably some slightly positive, and we get rejection. So and what scenario in appeal will make sense?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So appeals are tricky. With appeals, the key is making sure that you essentially tell the editor why you're making the appeal. So we've all gotten emails where it's just like, this reviewer is wrong and I don't like them. And also I think it's this person and they've always hated me. And, this is just unfair. Those appeals usually don't work. What does work is sending in an appeal where you're like, well, okay, this reviewer said this, and this is they misunderstood this. Here's a couple of references and why they misunderstood it. And then, oh, this reviewer said, this work isn't suitable because it hasn't done the statistical analysis. If you can come back and say, we've done the statistical analysis, here you go, then that's something that really helps. If you're able to start to address reviewer comments, that's a good time to appeal. If it's when you just say like, oh, this reviewer is just wrong, that doesn't give the editor much to work with because the editor won't know why you think the reviewer is wrong. So giving lots of evidence and kind of a considered and nicely phrased answer instead of just being like, I can't believe this, that helps a lot.
And for the next step, so that I find another. So like, what's the best time? I think the evidence is strong enough.
Yeah, so it will vary a bit by the scenario. Oftentimes, additional reviewers are brought on, and the editor will usually go back to the original reviewers also, especially if there are concerns that one reviewer is really biased and there's like a good reason why you think that reviewer is biased and the editor agrees, then there might be reviewers that would be not included in the process anymore. But yeah, for the most part, we try to still use original reviewers and bring on extras, especially if there's some concern over a specific part. Where it's like, well, we don't think that they understood this part. And we're like, ooh, okay, maybe let's consider bringing on someone who would also understand that. Yeah.
So we have one question from our online audience. That is, if you don't mind, I will read it out. Thank you very much for your excellent presentation. As you know, the Nature series of journals have some specific requirements for the structure of their papers. For example, the results and the discussion sections need to be presented before the methods section. Do you have any advice on writing in this structure, or are there any issues that we need to pay attention to? Thanks so much. From our online attendee Li Shuangjun.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So most nature journals now are quite lenient on the structure when you first submit. So don't be too worried about exactly where the methods are. Those can be moved if the article is sent out to review. So that part's great. Usually you can just send it in sort of as it is. One of the things to really pay attention to when you're writing, if you're targeting a specific journal, is think about the audience for that journal. So bring out points in your research that would appeal to that audience for whatever the journal is. So if it's a sustainability journal, think about that when you're writing, versus if it's more of a materials focused journal, then you might want to bring out and discuss things sort of at the material scientist angle instead of the sustainability angle. It will still be the same results and the same messages, but just how you phrase it makes quite a big difference in terms of reaching the right audience. One of the things that probably isn't what you were thinking of, but is really important with having to move things around to meet different journal formatting requirements is use a reference manager. Some of you are like, of course, everyone uses a reference manager, but you would be surprised. Some people don't, which is fine. And so you have to move things around and then you have to reformat, say, move all your methods numbering by hand. So reference managers are really helpful for this. And yeah, different people like having results and discussion together versus separately. I don't really have a preference. I think the journals are pretty flexible on this now, so just check the requirements of the journal and go from there. I hope that answered your question.
We have.
Yeah, do you have any recommendation for the file format? Like data file or Word file or?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, any is fine when you're submitting. I think it's really just down to researcher preference. At least our journals can handle Word or LaTeX, either one. Yeah, I think they both have their pros and cons.
Can you tell us more about the commission process? Like, do you go out to a group of people or individual authors and give them ideas?
Yeah, that's a good question. We've done both, or we do both. I would say most of the time we have an idea. So we see something that's like a really hot topic. There's been a lot of work on it, some major breakthroughs, and we think that's a good topic. We think that would be a good time for a review to get everyone updated on the field. And then usually what we do is we'll go to a single person and say, we're interested in a review on this. Would you want to write it? And if so, sort of we think a team could look like this. So if it's really multidisciplinary, we might say, we really think you need a civil engineer and you need a social scientist, just as a random example. Sometimes we do go to groups. So if we notice there's a big consortia working on something and we think, oh, that's really cool, then we might approach kind of the consortia itself and be like, are you writing a review? If so, like, let's work on it together, or let's write a roadmap or something like that. Yeah, we do both. It's one of the most exciting parts because it's when everything comes together.
我23年没申报是吧？空的是吧？
对，22年是吧？
啊
鉴定的。
啊，我是对我看这个鉴定是22年鉴定的，
Yeah.
对吧？
So we are going to be publishing around 50 reviews and perspectives a year. So it's not a lot. It's 4 to 5 an issue, and we'll be publishing monthly. So there will be, around 4 to 5 reviews or perspectives per year. And then, per issue. Per year would be a bit crazy. And then probably 1 to 2 kind of comments or something like that, opinion pieces, and then a series of shorter pieces. So like Tools of the Trade, we want to publish every month, research highlights on work we find cool, things like that. So we'll put together, they're not huge issues, but we think they're nicely packaged little issues. Sometimes they're focused issues, mostly they're not, because we're interested in a big variety of things. I think one of the topics that we've done a lot on that is a really important issue is energy production and storage and sort of industrial decarbonization. But one of the reasons I was so excited to come here was I think kind of the role of the built environment and civil and environmental engineering in sort of advancing sustainability transitions is underappreciated. So that's something we're really interested in pursuing. I'm happy we work in teams of 3. And we hired 2 other editors, and one is an expert in photovoltaics and one is a battery expert. So confidentially, I've gotten to finally be like, oh, cool. Okay, you guys do that. And I can go do things more like this, which is something I'm excited about. So if you're interested, just reach out, let us know.
I have one, actually I have 2 questions. First one is, in your experience as an editor and the Nature Reviews critically technology or in your previous experience. So what are the most common mistakes that authors makes when submitting their manuscripts, and how can this be avoided to improve the chances of acceptance?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I think one mistake I see a lot is just not writing for your audience. So if you want a really broad audience and you're writing in a really, really technical style, that's something that's just not going to quite fit within wherever you're submitting to. I'd say that's one of the main ones. One of the other ones is specifically thinking about reviews, is there might not be enough thought about the breadth and the depth of the review. So how broad do you want to make it, and how in detail do you want to make it? And that's something where if you go too broad and you don't go very deep into a topic, but you've written it really technically, then people might not be as engaged with it. Experts are going to be like, oh, well, I already knew that. There's nothing here for me. So, and then on the other side is sometimes we do get review proposals that are like 30,000 words, which is great, but like very long and very technical. And they get submitted to, say, a Nature Reviews journal where we don't publish articles that are that long, and we try to make everything accessible. So then that's not to say that those are bad articles, but those are ones where we're like, we just can't publish this. So yeah, I would say thinking about the audience and then how to frame the review or the article to fit that, and how in detail you need to go is the biggest mistake I see.
Thank you for your answer. The second question is that, I think, in the field of transportation, because, and urban science, because my research focused on this field. So what do you think, what are the, most hot topic, or the most, your favorite research directions of your journal? You mind, give us some suggestions, or what?
烦，从跑这些东西看到都是
That's a great
业务
question.
皮，该干什么呀？你这样时
To
间
be
又不
honest,
要
since
找。
I'm very interested in transportation, but I'm not a transportation expert. One of the reasons I like coming and talking to people is because I like to hear what you guys think are the most interesting directions. But some of the things I've been quite interested in are, I mean, there's the more, I guess, vehicle technology side of things, and, what technologies are going to be used to go into low carbon transportation modes. But then something else I think that personally I'm really interested in is not just like, oh, are we going to all adopt electric vehicles, or, are we going to do batteries or fuel cells, which that's super interesting. But then something I'm interested in is how do we just use what we have more intelligently and build in better systems from the beginning. So instead of, all of us having our one car that we drive around, and I have a diesel car. It's embarrassing, but I do. It happens. But it's not just about, all of us switching from our diesel car to electric vehicles, but how do we make what we have more interesting, and how do we reduce reliance on what we have?
They should know that, currently, the transportation could, the emissions from transportation could accounted for more than 24% in the world. And it could be the most difficult part to
没办法，
remove the carbon emissions. So that's challenging. It's also very important.
真的
The
很烦。
interesting thing is that, I read many papers from Nature climate journals, like the
我说没
material
有设置
science,
这么多
bioengineering,
快
they
快
are
的东西。
much more easily to be published. But the papers and the research
就
in
是
traditional civil and environment engineering, less to be, I think either it's more difficult to be accepted by Nature climate journals.
Yeah.
Actually, it's very important that I think it has very long value change. It impacts our society. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're preaching to the choir. I love transportation related work, and
Transportation very important.
yeah, and there's a handful of us editors who are really interested in it. And the nice thing is sort of from the top down. So from the chief editor of Nature, who's really lovely, she loves transportation stuff. And so from there on down, I think there's a lot of interest in it and in trying to publish more civil and environmental engineering. So yeah, I know historically it's been maybe overlooked a bit editorially, but yeah, there's.
Thank you. So, are there any questions? Okay.
Yeah.
Dr.
Thank you for your presentation, and I have one question. I'm from civil engineering department, and just a month before last month, a professor from Spain published one paper in our field in Nature. So that makes us consider to present our research into nature families. So my question is about, could you please give us some suggestions if we have some awesome research or awesome ideas? Should we start with low-level nature journals like Nature Communications, or we could just start with Nature, or should we invite some
我这得无语，
authors that published
不知道
their research into nature journals before? So we invite them to our co-authors.
Great questions. So I guess starting from the last question upwards, you don't need to invite people who have published in Nature before. I just personally, we all get really excited when we we're like, oh, these authors, this is their first like Nature or Nature whatever paper. We get really excited because we're used to seeing the same people submit, and when something makes it from people we haven't worked with before, we're like, oh, this is awesome. Because we know it means a lot to the authors and it means a lot to us. So no, invite people to work with you who you think are doing great research, but they don't need to already have been working with us. I should also mention a lot of people who publish with the nature journals a lot get rejected a lot too. So yeah, they just send us some people just send us everything. That's fine. The question about which journal to go to first, I think it depends on a couple of things. I'm a big fan in going to whichever is the journal you would like to be published in most and going there first, because it might fit that journal. And the only thing you really lose, like going back to your question earlier, the only thing you really lose is time which I know is valuable. But yeah, if you would submit to say Nature and they reject it, then they might recommend already going to a different journal. In terms of, I know it's a little hard targeting research journals right now for civil engineering, but Nature Cities and Nature Sustainability, Nature Water journals like that are interested in it. So if you think it's within scope, you can definitely try sending to them. This isn't like the official statement, but from my experience, like just kind of being friends with those editors, their engineering work is something we're happy to give a little more leeway to in terms of hitting that novelty bar for editorial work. So I definitely encourage you to try submitting to them. And then when you submit, one thing that I think is important to highlight is, there are some topics where maybe the advance isn't the actual underlying science or something, but it's like that you've actually shown that you're able to do this in the real world. And I think there's a greater appreciation of that within editorial than there used to be. So if you're able to tell the editor, we've always thought that we could do this and we've done it on the lab scale, but this is the first time we're doing this in the real world, or we've managed to do this really difficult thing in the real world and it works, they're interested in that. So long answer, but I hope helpful.
Man, introduce yourself.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
let's,
I'm not I'm studying for college, so I'm from King's College London, so I heard the assignment, so it came here, so if you're interested, people.
Well, thank you for coming to this part of the city.
Yeah, and I know like LaSalle Press, so they have a service, something like, when multiple editor from journals, they send the same submission and same. So I think, given Nature also have so many journals, they may have some kind of the intersection regarding the research interest. Is there any potential similar service of down the line? Something?
Yeah.
I just have time is very valuable. I think that saved time for everybody.
Yeah. Julia's taught me if I give away I don't know how much of the trial was ever public, but we did try something like that a few years ago. People just didn't care. Yeah, so we did offer that for a little while on a trial basis with some journals. I think it was some physics and some biology related topics. There wasn't high enough uptake to keep doing it. So I'm very happy to give that feedback to the publishing team.
Under a certain point of view, how transfer works in nature, which is great compared to other publisher, it's as a similarities mechanism. So there's a lot of consultations.
说的什么呀？别说了，我很烦。
I wish you came to all of the talks I gave. So this is Julia. She used to work in the publishing team for the Nature portfolio, and now she's a PhD student here. So this is why I'm also like throwing questions about publishing strategy over. But yeah, so I mean, I really like the idea of doing that. There just wasn't that much interest in doing it, which is a shame because we were all excited and like, oh, this is so cool. But yeah, you had a question. Ooh. For us, it's still quite early days on them. I've been slightly obsessed with maritime port decarbonization, which I know sounds, I don't know why. My chief editor used to laugh at me because I'd be like, look, it's another article on like how we decarbonize ports. And he's like, okay, Laura. But yeah, that's a topic I really like, but I don't know why. But yeah, that's a fun question.
In previous slides, you mentioned the Nature Review journals, they like the articles summarize and interpret the research to create an overview, right?
Mhm.
So what can you give further explanation? Which does it mean? The Nature Review journals like some summary of the comment or the letters or perspective papers from the public. Does that mean?
Yeah, so what we're really aiming to do is we want to publish articles that are, I know this is kind of regurgitating this slide, but it's ones that are interesting to experts and to non-experts, which is very difficult to do and why we do a lot of editing to help with that. But essentially, we're looking to publish articles that are going to pull together different primary research strands. So it should be based, for instance, the 7,000 word review. We want it to have about 200 references of, scholarly literature in there. So primary work published in other journals, and have, real scientific or engineering or policy related messages, and have enough detail in there that it's really well supported. Yeah, so it's a bit tricky, that balance. One of the, like I said, breadth and depth of scope is one of the biggest things we see, where we tell folks we want them to be kind of broad articles that are good summaries, and then they end up reading a bit more like a little too vague, and something where someone's like, well, I kind of could have gotten this from Wikipedia. So we do need that depth of expert insight, and to provide a review that someone couldn't have written themselves as a non-expert.
Yeah, I see. So following this, I have a comment that I think the technology, particularly the clean technology, is developing very fast,
Yes.
right? But our paper, like the review article process, I guess it's a very long process, and so I think we need a very quick form to communicate the most creative clean technologies in the world. For example, I attended a conference last week in China, and and saw many wonderful ideas. They are practical engineering projects. And very big projects like the utilizing the hydrogen for energy storage, something like that, to achieve the energy, efficiency and the carbon neutrality. Wonderful technology, so I mean, I don't know whether in such cases whether we can, make such technology or the application of engineering to the make it to be published in your journal.
Yeah, so if the question is about sort of a field moving so fast that a review can't keep up, I mean, that's a legitimate concern. So we as editors try to time when we publish things so that, if there's one field that's moving really slowly, then we might only publish a review on it every 5 years. But if there's one field that's moving really quickly, then we'd publish more targeted reviews more frequently. We're developing a couple of article types, are using article types that already exist to try to highlight those more fast-moving areas a little bit better. One of those article types is down to business, which is we're going to use it as a way to showcase like things that are being done industrially that are more like trials that are happening quickly and sort of on a smaller scale. And then also we're using a comment type that we're anecdotally calling cleaner futures, but that's where we have much more targeted, like 1,000-word discussions on, one specific technology or something where it's moving really quickly. Maybe we're not entirely sure where it will end up in 10 years, but it's something that's worth highlighting and highlighting fast. So we're trying to cover both.
And keeps communication.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. And introduce yourself.
Of course, an academic from Department of Engineering, which is the great to be back. I used to be here. I did my study in the postdoc.
Oh, awesome.
Nice to be back. But I was based at the biology and
Oh,
cool. So basically, I have a quick question while you were talking. Well, first of all, thanks very much for the very informative and a really insightful presentation, which is wonderful. So I had the chance to look at the Nature Review Clean Energy, the clean technology website, and noticed you have a different review tab articles where you highlighted a few, such as the review perspective and evidence-based guidelines, expert recommendation, roadmap, etc. However, there's also another category called technical review. Do you mind just elaborate a little bit further? What would be the difference between the review and technical review?
Yeah, that's a great question. So reviews are usually going to be a bit more narrative and focused around a topic and discussing the topic, but maybe not going into any of the techniques or the methods that the field uses to investigate the topic. Whereas technical reviews are more focused on a technique or method to do something. So if there's, say, lots of different ways where you can model some process, a technical review is a great place to go into that and say, here's all, first, what's the goal of this? Why are we modeling this? And then go into, here are the different ways to model it. Here's a comparison of the different models we can use. When would you use one over the other? Why would you use one over the other, and things like that. So technical reviews will be much more focused on the actual methods and techniques.
So the question is, I have actually in your mind,
Mhm.
and sometimes, in the review, unavoidably, we have some quantitative. Well, also we have the qualitative kind of review, just the overview.
Yeah.
But also, it would be nice to have a quantitative, sort of, insightful message. And in that case, unavoidably, we would bring some data analysis and also data synthesis based on the previous published evidence and the research. So would that be still counted as a review, or would that be counted as the data analysis?
That's a really good question. It depends a little bit on the balance between the review and the analysis itself. To me, kind of the line is drawn, and it's a very blurry line, but the line for me is drawn. If you have a good bit of review and the data analysis is more to kind of demonstrate, say with the technical review, if you're like, well, we've laid out how to, do this, sticking with modeling, do this modeling process. Here, let's show you an example of it and walk you through that with a few examples based on some already published data that we've pulled together. I think that's still a review. If the analysis is like, we found something wildly new and this is a whole new result that's just going to completely change the field, then that's probably an analysis, but yeah.
It's not like other changes based on this, but it's just a back-and-below calculation, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'll probably against the case by case, but then transfer to the general statistics. That's it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Actually, like also have a very specific question, probably discuss the after this. I don't want to take everyone's time. It's a very explicit.
Yeah. Yeah, just let me know. I'm happy to chat. Also, oh yeah, my email address has gone off the screen now, but yeah, I'm not so kidding.
Any questions? Questions, students? Okay, so I think okay, so we have to stop here, and thank you for all of you for your participation and engaging questions. This concludes our seminar, and we hope you find this seminar informative and thought-provoking, and have a great afternoon. That's it. Thank you very much. Thanks for your attention.
Thanks, everyone.
But we have a small certificate for Laura's wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Oh.
Yeah, this our department.